Disclaimer: the information and education material contained herein is meant to promote the general understanding and dialogue of GAN's processing. Such information is not meant or intended to serve as a substitute for a healthcare professional's clinical training, experience, or judgment. For patients and individuals, such information is not to be a substitute for professional medical, therapeutic, or healthcare advice or counseling. For medical issues or concerns, including decisions about medications and other treatments, readers, viewers, listeners should always consult their physician or, in serious cases, seek immediate assistance from emergency personnel. Prescription information, procedures, and use of medical devices information should be undertaken only by properly trained and certified medical personnel. We specifically disclaim any warranties, express or implied, including implied warranties of merchantability or fitness for a particular purpose. Such information is provided, as is, and is believed to be accurate at the time of its publishing, but it is the viewer's job to evaluate the accuracy of any information found in this presentation. Every case presented is of their own experience, applied by themselves for themselves, and it applies to their case only. Every person experiencing health problems should seek professional medical advice and consult their course of treatment with a doctor. The processes of plasma balancing described herein are a natural process which supports the body but does not replace medical advice or therapies one is already subject to.
And thank you very much, everyone. This is the Kish American Knowledge Team meeting, and we are in the spring of 2026. This is the Kish Foundation Spaceship Institute, Teachings on Plasma Science. We are doing the Intermediate PICO series. Subject today is blur fill. My name is Alexander. I am from Canada. It is March the 22nd of 2026, and this is part of the Kesh Foundation North America Plasma Education Series. So as we keep going, we are trying to keep it up, open, public for everybody to have access to this, but we have to keep going. And in this PICO series, we talked about ribbons, beacons, inherent array, and today, blur fill. A strange subject. When I first heard about it, I didn't really understand it because I'm not a scientist, but it is a very important scientific term, which is trying to explain how we get from here to there. And we have this inherent structure. As we said before, it's existing in something as a permanent, essential, or characteristic attribute. And an array is an impressive display or a range of particular type of thing, an ordered series or arrangement. As a verb, you can say, well, I will array, display, or arrange things in a particular way. So what is a blur? Well, I think we all understand that it's to obscure by making confused, inform, or outline. Make indistinct. The fog blurred the outline of the car. Some synonyms are a mask, a veil, darken, dim, cloud, to dim the perception or susceptibility of, make dull or insensible. Say, oh, well, what does that mean? Well, the underlying current is security, and true security leads to certainty. A false sense of security leads to a true sense of certainty. That's my quote. I am the author trying to do a blur fill. Some topics today require vision, the St. Rings of Saturn, covalent bonds, and transmutation. So we all know that we talk about our third eye squeezy, how we squeeze out a vision, and maybe the 3i interacts with that. But we've seen reactions on that, and it's been very difficult to discuss that in physicality because we still have this matter plasma dimension problem where we have this gravitational state where we can touch it and see it, and this magnetical state where we cannot touch or cannot see it. But both are part of the feedback, not part of the feeding. Man is feedback dominant. So we're kind of ignoring half the picture. And as such, we start to see that one of the reasons is we're stuck in the old box of old science. And we're thinking in things of dimension, 1 dimension or 2 dimension, maybe 3 dimensions, but only in the physical dimension. We have to step outside of the box where it's difficult to see, such as the nanotechnology and the PICO technology. And that's what we're talking about in this series, because we're trying to outline the principal matter, how it stems from PM ticks. These are magnetical energy packs, and they're parceled in various ways, and they diverge all over the universe and come together as a force field, converging as antimatter, dark matter, or matter gen. And that forms a plasma gen conversion, but it doesn't become physical until we have an interaction with another magrav, the gravitational field forces of the Earth. And then we have that interaction, which we call inertia, and we have the complete matter gen convergence. We saw that because we're in the beyond Beijing era on May the 25th. Sorry, May the 10th of 2025. The gold rush has begun. One moment. Yes, the 2025 gold rush has begun. We are in the 2026 silver rush. That too has begun. But there are other things that are happening. They're all emanating from that picoatomic state, which is taken as beyond the nanomonatomic state. It's like a pico beacon, demonstrating the gravitational inherent field strength through an emission array from that nebulous blurry point in the nanogap. We keep talking about that, and where exactly is that? So we differentiate between the 3 levels of transition. We have the transmission level of carbon-12, the transition level of carbon-14, and the transmutation highway of carbon-16. And somehow we cross from one highway to the other, and we're looking for that little entrance lane or exit lane. It's just at some blurry point somewhere. And how do we navigate through that? And then we see how the raindrop beacons come, and they come into this blurry water and hit in a certain point. And as a beacon, the waves go out. As they go out, they go up, and then the waves go down. And so this magnetical strength is imparted through its gravitational inherent picocore. It has to start somewhere, doesn't it? So as we tend to look at waveforms and singularity, say we're driving down a hill, we see that sometimes we have to go a crooked mile to drive a straight line. We call it transmission. Consists of zigs and zags. So we look at the Karakoram Highway and how do you know if you're zigging or zagging? So one way is magnetical and one way is gravitational. And in that process, well, you gravitate to more density as you come down the hill, don't you? And that is the thing about waves. And then we can modulate these waves. We can modulate them in singularity as a sine wave and have this very sharp focus, or we can do this in duality and have a kind of a dull, blurry focus. And so we refer to these as frequencies. So the sine waves in singularity consists of zigs and zags, but a sine wave in duality, it's all zigs and no zags. And so, well, how is that? Well, because there's always something filling in the middle. So when we look at these frequencies in duality, they're all zigs and no zags. Or we have a competition between the foreground versus the background. What are you focusing on? That becomes the question. So as we try and outline in the books of number one from Marin Tavakoli Kesh, the universal order of creation of matter, bringing together the matter, the antimatter, and the dark matter, coming together as one. But in book number two, 1 and 1 is more than 2 because there is a connection, the structure of light. Somehow that fills in that gap in some kind of nebulous, blurry form. And then book number 3, the origin of the universe, where you have that point source and it divides into 2. And we are so happy with our understanding of man's universe, not really caring that it's only a tiny drop within a drop within a drop of a bucket. And it doesn't take into account our sister universe, which is kind of in that nebulous, blurry outedness somewhere, who knows where. And as we try and connect for 422 weeks, the one planet, one nation, one race for justice and world peace, brought to you by Rick Crammond and the members of the Universal Council, they understand that there is another world out there. And right now, we're being hidden from that by this facade, this blurriness that makes us think that we are just fallen angels, where this angular density of increased density and increased pressure and increased gravity is a falling through weakness because we have this increased dependence on the Earth space feeding. But there's an internal pressure of the Gans fields to balance off. This angular momentum is actually conserved. So this balancing off comes in the form of many aspects, such as duals. Duals as duality, right? That's a confrontation where you have two come together. They bring their energy and they manifest as a friction. And if it gets too hot, then these hands clench into fists and manifest into fighting. This is all part of the inertia density manifestation. So, gentlemen, shake hands and come out fighting. Isn't that the honorable way to do things? But we have rules of engagement. Some rules we call commandments. They tell us how to live. And there were 10, as far as I knew. Now we see another 14, it's a total of 24. And one of them is thou shalt not lie. And how do you feel having been lied to all your life? Because that's really what it is, because everything else in the background is kind of blurry, fuzzy and warm, as we like to refer to it. But we understand that it's all part of the energy binding needs in a self-serving attitude. That's the dimension point, me, myself, and I. But do I have to do that at the expense of others? Because they also have this me, myself, and I-ness that they have to worry about. So if we lie, cheat, and steal or kill from someone else and rob their energy, what is their option? So they have lots of options, but in the end, it all reduces our vitality. Whether you're the aggressor or you are the defender, it drains your vitality. We all become loose leakers in that process. And so we need some kind of vitality enhancement that encourages our emotional and physical well-being. And regular is not good enough. We need to get into super. So we have to cross this transaction zone because we have to understand that singularity requires a solo effort. And many like to go solo. because duality requires partnership. It has a tendency to slow us down, though, because a partnership requires reciprocity, which means a balance of incentives. So how do you get this balance of incentives when you have this failure to understand the plasma rule where the higher strength feeds the weaker strength? And then we change that to say the higher strength beats the weaker strength, or the higher strength eats the weaker strength. It's all a transaction zone. It's all a conflict point. But in essence, it's a binding zone. And so we have this inertia density manifestation, whether it's a conflict or whether it's a binding through the plasma strength, where the higher strength feeds the weaker strength. So you make your choice what you want to do. And so we see our world with what we see. We see with our eyes, and we like to see in color. And so these colors are distinct, but in this color wheel, they're kind of blurry. Well, the boundaries are kind of blurry, aren't they? You can see there's a green and there's a red, but there's everything's kind of fuzzy. But it all comes together from the three, the red, green, and the blue. It's called the RGB connection. And we get all of these various colors, and we find, wait, there's a different frequency range, and there's a different wavelength range, and there is a reference where if the wavelength increases, the frequency decreases. And this has an impact not only on how the density is created, how the relationship between the magnetical and gravitational is created. That's not what we're interested. We're just interested in this kind of blurry fuzziness between the red, infrared, and the violet, the ultraviolet. But, we like to have these distinct zones, and, so we say, well, that's all part of the refraction, you see, because the white light comes in, and then in physics, a change in direction of a wave passing from one medium to another is caused by its change in speed. For example, waves travel faster in deep water than in shallow. But we go through all this range of frequencies, and at some point it's red, and at some point it's green, and at some point it's blue. But how do you manage this specificity? So we talked about recently the structure of Saturn, and a gentleman, Edward Roche, had a Roche limit. It's a calculation performed to explain the structure of the Saturn's rings and moons. And so when we look at these rings, they seem pretty solid, but there's a gap between the rings. So there's a starting point, there's an end point. But let's look closely. There's a start point on the outside of the ring, and there's a start point on the inside of the ring that goes towards the center of the ring. And those rings are kind of blurry. And then there's another ring, and it starts and it stops. And that stop point on the other side is the starting point coming back inward. And that ring is kind of blurry. And then, of course, there's the planet itself. And although it has a boundary, there's a gap between the boundary of the planet and the boundary of the rings. And so when we take a really close look, and of course, what we found was within those rings were a bunch of rocks, tiny little rocks. And so the Roche limit actually examined the effects of these strong gravitational fields upon the swarm of tiny particles. Well, they're tiny compared to the fact that the Saturn is massive. So the thing is, what he figured, as we said, it is a method of calculating distance in which an object held together only by gravity would break up due to tidal forces. And that distance became known as the Roche limit. So that is to say that as these particles came together, they came so close together that they all broke up. When they broke up and they spread out, but they stayed confined within the rings. And so we can't see these tiny particles. All what we see is that blurriness of the rings of Saturn. So when we look at any dimension, we see the three dimensions, X, Y, and Z axis, where the X-axis goes around the perimeter, the Y-axis goes through the poles, and the Z-axis is the manifestation of that dimension. But when we describe motion, we look at it as going on the X-axis dimension on the ground. And so when we look at a car, for instance, we see the car, and then the car is moving, and we see the car again. And then there are all these points in between. Well, how many points are there in between? And how many points is enough? So we don't have a calculator to calculate all the points because each one would have to be precisely measured. And the closest measurement that we get usually is by the length of the car. But in international racing, they don't measure distance anymore by measuring the length of the car or the distance behind the other car. They measure it by time. So the distance between one car and the other car is by time. So in the process of building dimensions, we have a point. We call that the PICO point. And that is the point of our vision within our eye. We have a point in the center of our eye. We call it the pupil. And there you can see the car. And you can see the car from all angles, and everyone standing around the car can see that car, and they see the same car, but they see it from their point of view. But what happens when you add a second point and you connect one? So it's not the same PICO point, is it? And that's the same thing that happens when you see the car go. You see it at one point, and then it goes to the next point. And that is the nature of our vision. And to understand that, we have to understand that in the physicality, it is the slowest state. And the light is going at the speed of light. So in order for us to see that light and to move our eye to focus in on the movement of the car, we can't move fast enough. So we pick off certain points. And if we say, well, there's a point at one point, and there's a point at another point, and everything else in between is a blur fill. Well, who does that fill? Because we claim that we see the car move. So when we look at these frequencies, and we talk about a sine wave of singularity, we can only see the peak. We can't see the valley, because the sine wave keeps moving, and it's moving so fast. So in order for us to see it, we can only see the caps. But when you have this sine wave in duality, then it becomes a problem. Then it becomes really blurry. So the only thing that we see are just these points of these caps. So the path link is our points of view, which is the top only. The bottom is a blur fill. And if that frequency didn't go down, it wouldn't be able to come back up. And if it didn't come back up, then we wouldn't be able to see it, would we? So the susceptibility is the upness versus the downness. So every time it comes back up, Oh, well, then we can see it. Well, that's the point. But in between, there was this downness, which is just a blur fill. And so our mind fills the gap because there is a gap. So how do you fill that gap? What do you fill it with? Especially when you don't have that detail. Well, just dump it in a pail and kind of swish it all together and make it kind of blurry and say, okay, well, there's this dynamic blurry plasma in the middle somewhere, and it emits and it creates these fields that go around, and they're all kind of nebulous and they're all kind of moving. And, they're moving so fast that we can't see them. So everything's just kind of blurry. But the dynamic plasma is so blurry that we can't even see it at all. It's not in physicality, is it? It's in a plasma state. So how do we get this consistency? We have this dichotomy of this chaotic, random, but it is consistent. And so how do we translate into that practical, the scientific and religious context? What factor is at play here to bring these two together? So the one thing that is consistent is their soul positioning. It's positioned at the crossroads where we have that inertia feeding vision and this plasmatic symbiosis of bringing all of these fields together. So these plasmatic fields are compared to the physical reality. And so all the colors and all the points, they come together and we get the whole picture thanks to our blur fill. So we like to say, well, our auras are showing the soul of physicality and it has a color wheel. And so our auras are in effect an encapsulation of overlapping fields. Someone who's clairvoyant can see these fields. But these fields are not distinct. They're not universal. They're just kind of blurry. They're on the outer edges of our vision, the extreme parts of our vision, where they come to that threshold between the visible light and the non-visible light in our understanding. So whatever light that you're looking at is that binding point. So when you're looking at the colors, the RGB, the red, green, blue, there's a range between the black and the white. And whatever you have, and that color is that binding point. That is the midpoint at that point. Not necessarily the halfway point. So same thing when we have this atomic dependency between the neutron and the atom. The neutron has the convergence of the matter, antimatter, and the dark matter. But when it goes into an atom where you have the marriage between the electron and the proton, there's an imbalance. You can't round it off and discount it. There's a release of PM ticks. That is the blurriness that is differentiating between the two. And that's only looking at it on one side. So as we drive our cars, we are known as the four-wheelers of creation, where we have the natural creation and the natural decay balanced off on one side with the natural decay and natural creation on the other side. But the other side is a balance between the intensity and the outtensity on both sides. So that inertia bonding fudge factor, and the reason it is a fudge factor is because it's kind of blurry. It's non-specific. We don't understand it. We don't accept it. And at what point are you on one side and what point are you on the other side? So the thing that we do know is that there's a magnetical consistency. So when we look at the neutron, it is an overlapping fields that makes it gravitational. But the electron has maggrav fields that are at various points and constantly in motion. And so when you look at these points, and they're all magnetically consistent, and they're all moving, but you can't see that because you can only see the points. You don't see the in-between. You have to fill those gaps in with a blur fill. So this is the understanding of the ray motion, which is part of the creation. So you have these overlapping fields and these boundaries and bonds that are in these boundaries. This is that blur fill in between. And it is from there that create satellite motion, which mimics the structure of the original construct. And as it goes from that original construct into its satellite position, there's that unseen blur fill in between, which links the initial structure with the satellite structure. And because it keeps moving, and it keeps moving at such a rate, we can't see it. We just have to fill in the blanks, if you will. So there is constantly a motion from the plasmatic spectrum to the physicality spectrum. So this covalent bonding dimension is a two-way street. So not only are we having a plasmatic bond between the neutron and the electron, but we're having a physicality spectrum threshold being crossed at the covalent point between the manifestation of the neutron and the manifestation of the electron. So which one's the reality dimension? And when do you know what it is? Because really it's all just vanilla, isn't it? It's undifferentiated. It's energy in motion. But we tend to be discriminating. So we have a selection of our own personal star of physicality, and we chose the solar physicality of our sun. But that comes from a pre-selection process, the solar physicality of the stars of the universe. And they're using the sun to shield us on many levels. So these two dimensions have a threshold. And not understanding how to cross that threshold, we have to fill it in with a blurry understanding that somehow, yes, we did. We crossed that threshold. So in the basic understanding of energy on this planet, and we understand the surface to volume ratios and how we create the negative and positive charges, and how we can put a bend in the road and add another second dimension. And then that becomes an inflection point. So you have a left side and a right side. You have an upside and a downside. And then you have this equilibrium, this balance in between. So when we look at what we call elevation is when you bring two these points of gravitational stability and they come together by way of emotion. And they create another position. That's a position of choice. And that becomes the magnetical stability, the counterbalance to the gravitational stability. So as we add that energy, that becomes part of elevation. But when we come to the Earth space and we interact with that Earth space, which sent out a beacon of inherent dependency, and we brought all the different civilizations together, and we say, well, how can all of these divergent civilizations have the same story of the Great Flood? And so you see how they come together, and they do the same thing as we do macro to micro when we get down to the nanocharges. You see how there's a beacon charge, and then there's a beacon discharge. And from there, there's an alignment. And this is why we can take this monatomic alignment by nanocoating the copper wire and turning it into a carbon nanocrystal. And then we layer it, and we have these nanomonatomic layers, how they nest together, and they have these nano gaps. Well, what's in those gaps? We don't see the gaps. We just have this star formation where we point to it with our fingers. And take your first two index fingers and point them to each other, and then rotate one hand 90 degrees, and you'll have created a tetrahedron out of your fingers. That is the basis of the star formation. And so to balance off that star formation, there has to be a magnetical gravitational relationship. But when we say boots on the ground, they're not upside down, they're not down under, and they're not on the ceiling. They're on the ground. Doesn't matter where you are, you're on the ground. And that becomes the important point of the inherent gravity. So when we look at the mountain ranges extend above the ground, and the seas extend below the ground, into the ground, below the what we call sea level in some cases. But these mountain ranges have a one side and another side. So they have this PICO core. And when you have a couple mountain ranges that come together, each of them has that inherent gravity to exist. If we understand through a simple rotation, and an orientation to another position, because there are three dimensions. So when we bring the PICO core in duality, that gravitational core has to come together through inherent gravity. Yeah, so now we've taken care of two dimensions. So we are that inherent array. We're sitting on top of this core. And that is our gravitational conformation. Doesn't matter whether we're going up or down. We always have our feet on the ground. But when you have the star formation and you have this inherent core, really and truly, which way is up when you have this core? And it's kind of a blur fill of an energy field coming together from these various points. We see the rotating motors. We see the GANs in the motors, in the rotating balls. And we have this inherent PICO core. And that's what we did in Beijing. But not just one set of rotating balls, but in pairs, in duality. And we created a star formation. and the residue was gold. But it didn't look like gold. It was kind of dark. It was just kind of a blur fill. It was spread out all over. So there was some kind of inherent connection line between all the reactors, and it created multiple monatomic energy flows with all of these nanostars, created a superconductor at room temperature. And when you have more than three, you can create inanimate things. But when you have three in a chain that are animate, they fold over. And so these fundamental nuclear feeding inertias create these three dimensions. And each of these points is a fragment of the complexity, offering gravitational stability and dimensional portability. These are all dimension points, but they're all in micro and in macro. And so if we can understand the matter plasma dimension and its dilemmas, we see that there's a mag-grav energy transfer state between the plasma state, the GaN state, the nanostate, and the atomic state. And there's a left side and a right side, but there's an upside and a downside. And so this is fundamental for communication, because the communication that we understand is through a frequency. And so each of our cells has a construction and can communicate with other cells. But first it has to communicate with itself. And then it can communicate with other cells. And then the collective creates a communication. And if we have an overcommitment to the gravitational stability, where this plasmatic communication ends up being a physical interference, it kind of disrupts the communication. So each of the cells are like a cellular beacon, and they're giving and taking all the time because we are in this matter dimension where we have physicality and we have a plasma reality. And since the phospholipids are tail to tail, there is a gap between them, which creates the cell boundary. But somehow we cross that boundary, and it's kind of a blur fill. Because we see the phospholipids but there's an inside and there's an outside. And so as these waves and frequencies emit, there's an upside and a downside, and there's a constant change. And so when we go to this saturated fatty acid, it becomes a straight line. And so the upside and the downside have this array. We don't see it, but it has to be there to support it. And then when there's a change, when we see the omega-3, 6, and 9 bend and create a different dimension, then we see a different kind of array, creation of water. So we see the relationship between the creation of protein and the creation of water. They're at the opposite ends. So when we have a balance, like we are in terms of humanity, each of us is a beacon of consciousness, and each of us has an emission aura. And this is all part of the carbon structure. That's why we're organic. And so we have this upness and downness as well, which balances everything off. So when we look at these phospholipids and we see, well, these amino acids and essential fatty acids are actually part of the phospholipids. So we have this hydrophilic head and this hydrophobic tail, and that's what forms the skin of the cells. But they're tail to tail. And so they differentiate between an outside and an inside. Whichever side you're on, you're just looking at the points. You're just looking at the point of view of the tops. The bottom is kind of a blur fill. And if you're on the inside, all you're looking at is at the tops. So whether you're on the outside or you're inside that phospholipid array, you're looking at the hydrophilic heads. So that gravitational transition is the one that takes you from the outside to the inside or from the inside to the outside. But we don't see that connection. But thanks to the fact that the fatty acids can be in a straight line or bending, shows the difference. And that's how we digest our food. We convert that food to GANs. That's part of the energy supplementation. So we absorb this nutrition essence. That becomes part of the gravitational attraction of energy. And we release the waste essence. That's part of the magnetical repulsion of energy. So the fundamental point in the gravitational neutron is calcium. That's where the internal pressure comes from. So our existence on this planet is calcium inherent. And that calcium gives us that gravitational neutron interaction. So we're allowed to communicate within the cell. We're allowed to communicate between the cells. We're allowed to communicate collectively. This is all part of the natural process. And the connection threshold is that blur field that kind of gets us from here to there. This is the transaction zone, which takes us from that plasma state to that GANs or nano or atomic state, however we choose. So fundamentally, it follows the emission of intention, where beyond the aura, we have this dynamic plasma interaction where we have this launch point goes to a target point. But that target point becomes a launch point, comes back to the original launch point, which is now the target point. This giving and taking, the upness, the downness, the left and the right, the balance, the equilibrium. And it's how we take the GANs of soul, bringing together the cups of life, where we took the cup of emotion, one product of a cup of emotion with another product of a cup of emotion, created another cup of emotion field. Same thing with the cup of physicality. We took two cups of physicality, brought them together with a cup of physicality field. And at that point, we created that transaction zone at the PICO core, the nucleus of the cells, that gravitational calcium certainty. You are a gravitational entity traveling in a magnetical field, and you're connected through the emotion of love. So is it a symmetry or is it a reflection? Well, we say we have a left brain and a right brain. Well, we have a physical copper GANs and an emotional zinc GANs. But we also have this carbon connection to the transition highway. which takes us to the transmutation highway. That's the highway of love. And the manifestation of the physicality is the off-ramp in terms of our earth space. So when we look at our earth space, we only see how we've been pioneering America. But we've been pioneering this world. We're nowhere near overpopulated. That's just an illusion. So all of our life has constantly been an illusion. And we have this reference to love by way of Aphrodite, the ancient Greek goddess of love. But even that is an illusion, because there's a left-handed and a right-handed, there's an upside and a downside, and that only takes into account the two things. What it doesn't take into account is that these three dimensions have a support structure that gives it that equilibrium, and that support structure also has an equilibrium. So if we understand that, then we understand the cosmic ray equilibrium. So when we think of a cosmic ray, we just think of one ball of light, but it is a series of overlapping fields, which gives it that stability, that security, that certainty, because of its complexity. And that's what we have in our creation. The creation of the free plasma comes through that inherent connection line, which we call it kind of a squeezy in the plasma state, but it's a blur fill. But it has a gravitational PICO core of consistency. And that is a structure within a structure that connects the star fields. The star fields of the amino acids of carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, and nitrogen, fundamental to the creation of life. And so when we were in Beijing, there was an inherent susceptibility and singularity. We created the gold, but it was undifferentiated, really, because there's an inherent susceptibility in duality. To make that gravitational completion, we needed an external input of the Gans field of humanity, clearly demonstrated, where we had this demonstration of the counterweight measures, the physical state and the atomic state, where we take the gravitational attributes of weight and mass and marry them to the nuclear state, the plasma state, the magnetical attributes of Tesla and time, and balance those off. It's how we start with the plasmas and bring them together, and no two plasmas are the same. But they all come from the same source. So how is that possible? So it all depends on the path link and susceptibility. And so you have this dimension array point where you're bringing together the magnetical and gravitational fields together in a transaction zone. And each of them has that stability, and then they manifest into this gravitational certainty, because this planet has oxygen. And that is what allows us to cross the threshold, where we go from that plasmatic decay to Gans. But we can also go from that Gans decay to go from a gas to a liquid into a solid. We convert that light into a gravitationally inherent structure. But we require supplementation due to consumption. That assumption is based on an acquired knowledge, came from the conditional teaching by ancient teachers. And as much as we respect them, what about the unconditional teaching by the Creator? This introduces a new awareness, a historical threshold between cosmic feeding and loosh harvesting. So we have these inherent attributes that give us this gravitational conformation, this gravitational center point, this gravitational picocore, this gravitational certainty. This is a mutually assured construction attribute. So the cornerstones of the spheres are the three dimensions, and the monuments of litter are here or here or here. They're always a blurry point of stability or a blurry point of security or a blurry point of certainty. So as we go into this uncharted territory and we see that we are an array within an array, and there are many stars beyond that nanomonatomic state covering that full range from the decay to radiation. And this is all coming from that AI, that ancestral intelligence. We are the technology, we are the inertial product, and we are the image of our dimensional convergence point. So we are now looking to better understand that energy portability, how we can do that energy state transition by elevation, which takes us from the physical matter state to the energy state, and the inertia, which takes us from the energy state to the physical matter state. So the elevation involves expansion. And that expansion is all part of the greater oneness. So all of us can suddenly transcend the limitations of nuclear science. And we've been saying that for 634 knowledge seekers workshops. The message is the same. It always comes from the cosmic ray transmission, and we get to practice that next on April the 17th. So please feel free to join us then. Remember, the Kesh Foundation research teams can turn diamonds to gold or silver. Since May the 10th of 2025, that was the PICO core of truth. And with the One Nation Network, we can facilitate the scientific rescue to open the blinds, one nation network at a time. And that time is now, because we could clearly see that from the 630th Knowledge Seekers Workshop, we saw the embedded inherent frequencies, but we also saw the soul of physicality have a threshold. And how do we cross that? It required a blur fill. It was there. We are all one planet, one nation, and one race. And we all need a world peace treaty, because our mission is to bring peace on earth and join humanity with the universal community. And that connection is very blurry. So we want to bring man as equal to all the beings in the universe by teaching the plasma science and technology equally to everyone, that no one is left out and no one is abused due to lack of knowledge. And you can help us achieve this goal, because we're all in this together. This is the Kesh Foundation Spaceship Institute Teachings on Plasma Science, welcoming all the beautiful plasma travelers of the carbon nations, learning about the new frequencies of the new organic plasma science. That World Peace Treaty is something that you get to choose. You get to sign it unconditionally and mean it sincerely, because that is the path link to the future. The point of the true picotech is the polyatomic core manifestation. The overlapping ribbons of Earth space create that peace dome. Is the inertia present governed by dimensions of history? It is time to learn the history of self in a universal context, because the pico state silently explodes as a peaceful superconductor. The field strength of inherent arrays, blur fill, in the pico cores of matter, plasma, and universal states. So the plasma science is enhanced daily via that peace dome in a practical exchange for peace on Earth. So welcome to the new golden outer space age. And ask ourselves, what are we waiting for? That's the end of this class only. Stay tuned for the near future. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much, Alex, for sharing more in depth with us as we continue to unravel this knowledge for ourselves, not so much for the others. But it is quite complex, as he said. We need to understand the whole of the technology, not just an aspect of it. So thank you for continuing to sort of, in a way, review some of these concepts that we think are so strange in a way. And of course, they are to those of us who've been always connected to the matter state. Let's see if any of, thank you again, Alex. Let's see if any of the participants are not baffled that they may want to ask a question, or perhaps you've stumped our panelists today. Smaller spoon, Alex, smaller spoon. No, just kidding. And you talk about the energy always being in motion. I'll just take the screen for a moment. Let's see if we can share something. And, oops, we lost something here. Are you able to see that copper flask? Anyone?
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay, so maybe this is something similar to this transfer of energy that's going on. I bought this, as Mr. Kesh talked about, the benefits of copper, whether you understand it or you don't understand the benefits of copper, antimicrobial, and many other aspects of it. But it said in the instructions here to pour the water, your water, into the copper container and let the ions migrate into the water for a number of hours. So is this another transfer of energy, Alex, or is something just balancing between the water and the copper? But it said give it some time for, I would think ions are what? Collection of atoms or electrons, and again, changing charges perhaps. But this, without us doing anything, there's an exchange of ions. Perhaps you can explain that a little bit.
Well, there always is an exchange of ions, Mark. The difference is the rate. So, we are not accepting the transfer of energy. We look at a car can move, and we have to put fuel in the gas tank. And I think most of us understand that there's a relationship between the fuel in the gas tank and the car and moving. And it affects us in our pocketbook. So if we understand that basic principle, then we have to understand that everything is always in an exchange, but it's the rate. And so going back to the car analogy, if you slam on the gas, you won't be able to increase the speed of the car fast enough to take advantage of the full benefit of the combustion of the gas. And so you'll be very, very wasteful. And so we find that American driving styles consume more gas than, say, Japanese driving styles, where they actually teach conservation of gas through driving techniques. So there's always an exchange, and there's always a rate of exchange. So there's no denying that this is true, what you've just shown with this bottle.
Yeah, this is all confirmed by science and the rest of it, I think, in their understanding. But is there ever a point of balance, or do these energies just continue to chase each other around and try and find a balance? If most of them are dynamic most of the time, they haven't completely found the balance, have they?
That's exactly right. That is exactly right. So there is a constant seeking of the gravitational stability. That is the inherent structure of the gravity.
Mark, did they say what the purity of the copper is for this thing?
Yeah, 99.99. But even though I was thinking in olden times when people were using copper cookware or utensils and the rest, I'm sure they didn't even have a way of verifying the purity of the copper. And again, that's what they said it is. Did I test it? I don't really have a way to test it, Randy. But if they were using it in times past and it benefited them knowingly or unknowingly because of its properties, was that copper 99.99 pure back then? And maybe some of the impurities actually added something good to the whole process. I don't know.
Well, you have to go back to the way the copper is, created. So there are these vats. They are electrolytic, and they have these gravitational plates, and there's a solvent, and the copper ions gravitate to one surface and build up layer by layer, and they create these copper sheets. And that's how the copper is shipped from the copper mines. It's in sheets, and these sheets are brittle. So they're not pliable enough to create a bottle. So there are techniques that we have learned on how to make copper more pliable, and you can see the dimples on the side of the bottle, and then that's all very handsome. And understanding what the bend in the straight line means, it creates a point of conjunction with another dimension. It brings in more energy. So it all of these dimples are arrays.
Yeah, I thought that the hexagon look was a bit more unique than just the dimples that the other style had on it.
That's right. That's right. And then when you look at the sharpness of the dimples, you see that also makes an effect on the energy. But if you look at the dimension of the dimples and you imagine the magnitude or the minitude of the nanoparticles, and then go another three orders of magnitude down to the picoparticles. And if we understand that uh, shall we say, the intensity increases, the field strength increases. So the smaller the particle, the higher the negative charge. So the higher the negative charge, the higher the susceptibility, and the shorter the path length. So it definitely works. It just the difference is the rate. And for some people, that rate will be, a revelation. And for other people, I mean, if you're driving at the speed limit in the city and you're a race car driver, you'd figure that you were just basically standing still.
So again, when Mr. Kesh showed those reactors, I think he sort of was alluding, if you picked up on it, that you are that reactor. And we all are as a collection of humanity. If we could just get the awareness opened up, we can all start using and bringing a change plasmatically. But we need to reach, I guess, a tipping point. Isn't that right? Even when you're creating material, like it has to reach a certain point where it then converts into the matter state. So this is what we're doing with our central energies in a way, directing them that we can bring a change to a permanent peaceful condition. But I think the game has a lot of efficacy in transferring certain things to you as well. The same way the copper transfers its ions or atoms or groups of them to the water, the game will, again, this is what we're studying, or Mr. Kesh and the foundation and the team, about this transfer of energies or transfer specifically of emotions at this time. So very similar to what we see with the copper in the water, same goes on in the universe, the same Mr. Kesh showed in Beijing and so on and so forth, the same with the enlightenment game. The more you play, the more the ethos sinks in, and also the knowledge is embedded somehow, or aspects of it within the game, and many more things soon to come. So I just thought I'd show that as an example. And again, all confirmed by science, correct, Alex? This is not anything strange or that energies, or again, would we call this an electrolysis or a matter state interaction? Or matter state plasma interaction, let's say? Since the copper is matter state and the water, in a way, is matter state. So that would be.
Well, the key point is that the water is nature's solvent. So the key point being that the oxygen is what affords the gravitational stability of this planet, and the hydrogen is the manifestation of the PM ticks that are part of the cosmic ray array that is, being broadcast throughout this universe. So the convergence of those not only brings together an inertia field, but then it also determines whether or not it's in a plasmatic reality or a physical reality. So it always takes two to create one. And so the irony, when you look at book number 1, you look at 3 fields getting together to create one. And in book number 2, you have these 2 fields that are connected. We don't see the line of connection, so just a blur fill. And then we look at book number 3 and we say, well, 1 splits into 2. Is that 1 a 1? Or is that 1 a magnetical stability field in relationship to a gravitational stability field interacting within itself and creating an inertia field? So when we look at the classic understanding of science, the science is determined by the verification and validation by man-made means. And when they say man-made, they mean constructed. But isn't the love of your children or the love of your spouse also man-made? Anyway, that's the part that's missing. And that is the part that has to be added to the definition of scientific explanation. But, our explanations are selective. We are prejudiced and discriminatory. Discrimination is not a bad word. That's how the kidney differentiates itself from the lungs. But the kidney doesn't fight the lung, it works with the lung. So there's a cooperation. It's inherent. And that's what's missing from our society. So in that regard, scientifically, it's proven that we're dysfunctional. So how long does it take for us to become aware? And as we do become aware, what can we do about it? So we have to enlist the services of a higher power. And we have to go directly, because all the intermediaries are building their own empires. Thank you, everybody, for allowing me to continue to present. Mark, thanks for, doing a fabulous job of bringing the team together, and all the panelists. We're at a very critical point in our history where we start to see that, the quality of life is being diminished, and, all those things that you were worried about in terms of saving the environment and all that, and limiting the amount of toilet flushing and turning down your thermostat and everything, and understanding when these bombs are falling, they're doing massive, massive damage. And, you know, whatever you're doing is like so insignificant in terms of that. That's why we have to enlist the services that originally created this planet as a heaven. Thank you all. We'll talk again soon.
And you notice the color on the wall, Alex, someone had picked that for me. I didn't really like it, but the color on the wall, this is way before the Kesh Foundation in a way. It's called copper wire. That was the name of the color. I don't know if they still have it at Sherwin-Williams. So I see a similarity in a way.
It's amazing how that comes together, doesn't it? Isn't it?
Isn't it? Yes. Okay, any other thoughts, questions, comments from the participants or attendees? Anything you'd like to bring up? Again, remember what Alex was sharing about the transfer and so on is going on knowingly or unknowingly in the game of peace and enlightenment. We put many of the links in there, but of course it's up to you to pick it up and sign up for it and start to, in a way, create a peace, teach yourself to become peaceful or create a peaceful man out of the man. And this is part of the fall.
Sorry, Mark.
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm still having a lot of problem getting this to be able to pay the €1 or whatever you choose. I cannot make it work at all. So I don't know. Did you actually pay your €1 or 5 or whatever?
When it was announced to become part of an association, again, this is separate in a way, as I understand it, unless they're going
Yeah.
into the game, you need to keep the system working by donating those who play and are involved €1 per month.
But have you been able to pay it again?
No, I haven't tried to pay it again.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but you're able to play the game.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, I have paid it once, and I did that just before the changeover,
Uh-huh.
and I've been able to play the game. Mind you, it took me a while to get over it, but I think we had some teething pains at the beginning. I
Mm-hmm.
managed to get in, and you know we're playing the game. So of
I've been
course,
playing the game all along, and I'm having a problem right now. I was able to play the game after new register, so to speak, and then suddenly I cannot, when I logged off, I cannot get back in.
okay. So what's important here is that there has to be some kind of connection, and when you log into the game, you are using your email, and likewise. That's how they do the verification. And so when you
Hmm.
register, you also have to have that connection. So there's a multi-stage verification process, and they have to do that to authenticate your verification.
Yeah, and it's everything has worked, but and I was able to redo after they restarted the game, for 21st. I was fine. And then when I went to log off, like you're supposed to do every day, now I'm having problems, so I don't know why.
I did have that problem myself, the exact same problem you mentioned. But
Okay.
you know, there's another thing that's going on here, and that is that I'm looking at Mark's board here, and I'm not on that board. That so that there are, I think, 3 different servers at least,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's. I've often wondered is how are we going to cope with the volume, and I think that there
Yeah.
are some answers, you know, in the future that haven't been disclosed to us, but I do know that there it seems like there's 3 sign-in websites. So I'm signed into the world. I think, Mark, you're probably signed into the US. Is that correct?
correct. And don't forget, there's another platform especially tailored for the Chinese, which is being, I guess, whatever the flaw is, there's something, but so that's another platform.
Yeah, and I got caught into that, and that's, you know, I had a false start, and you know, a lot of us were complaining, you know, we were doing very well on our on our new game, and then all of a sudden the whole thing got reset. So the first day's
Yeah.
activity was all washed away like the sand castles on the beach.
Yes. Yeah, that's what happened.
Yeah,
Um,
well, it's no big deal. I mean, all in all, we're part of the process. Okay, so uh, what do they say? Rome wasn't built in a day.
well, it's telling me invalid credentials, but I did this exactly. I was very careful. So when I logged off, like I would normally do every day, now it's not accepting my credentials. So I don't know exactly what I should do. I'll probably send an email.
That would be the best way. Yes. Well, I
Probably.
actually, if you log in as a new player and send the verification to the same email address so that they can send you a new login code. The
I
login
did
code,
that. Yeah, I did that. And
well,
it's
did you get a
now, it
response?
was working pretty much the whole day. And then when I logged off, like I usually do, um, then all the problems started again.
No, I understand. I understand. So the connection between, the verification and the game, could have been disconnected for some reason, and
Yeah.
it's a computer, okay? It
We know
just
what happens. Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but to get that certainty, it needs to become more complex, and I think the they've done a fabulous job getting the game to this position.
Oh, yeah.
If you understand how difficult this is, um, it's a monumental task, and just to get to this stage has been very, very good.
I'm
Have you
Uh,
tried
amazed.
leaving the game on? Yeah, I don't log off. I leave it on 24/7.
No, I don't stop my laptop, but I log off daily because you receive the ACC.
well, interestingly enough, I didn't receive the ACC, so
No, I didn't either. It started up again, but there was no, unless they're changing the amount, I don't know.
well,
But
I'll find out tonight because we'll be starting in an hour or so the new day. So I'll
oh,
try it again.
You know what
okay.
time the game resets, Alex?
Universal, yeah, Utrecht,
UTC, yeah.
UTC time.
Okay, what time?
I received it 200 again.
Oh
Yeah.
gosh, Claudia,
Yeah.
it's south. It must be the place where you're staying.
Are they still giving you 200
Yes.
for logging in and every day and logging out and
I
logging?
tried it today, so
I'm going to try it as well.
yeah.
Yeah, it's I think right now in North America it's 8 o'clock in the evening.
Uh,
Uh,
42 on the New York time, PM, 542 right now in New
no,
York.
that's right. That's right. Yeah. So it'll be at 8 p.m.
Ah,
New York time. We're 5 hours behind, and I guess next week we'll have the uh, time change again, and we'll be back to the 6 hour difference.
Yes.
so you think it's at 8, 7, or 8 o'clock is when it would reset once they switch to CEST?
Yeah, for the American team, 8 o'clock is when it resets. You can tell because of your plasma. I mean your meditation. No, what do they call that? Consciousness drops down 10%.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yes, it works, Alex. I just logged off and logged on. I got 200.
Nice. Okay.
Oh, you did?
Yep, just
Well,
now.
okay. I'm leaving. I got to get my 200.
I'm very jealous because I'm stuck here, but I'm gonna keep
Yeah.
trying and see.
Yeah. And we're privileged and humbled in a way because we're showing in a light. There's such grinding poverty in so many areas of the world that we can't even imagine unless we live there. There is almost absolutely no way out of it. And so we're privileged and humbled to show the way out of this grinding poverty.
Well, as I told you last week, there's a lot of kids who are, you know, could use the extra money and they'd be very happy to, you know, to do that. But you understand the parents are bearing the burden of their cost of living. But the seniors, now there's a problem. They're on a fixed income or they're in a, you
Yeah,
know, they have a,
Stuck.
tighter than it is today. I mean, in the normal structure we operate in, they're saying that costs are going up much faster and everywhere across the
So
board.
in the teaching, he said that in the poor African areas, they're going to start giving something right away then.
Yes, the coins, 1,000 coins. You'll be a
Okay.
virtual millionaire.
So that means that if you can get them online, then they're already ahead of the game. Of course, they need that to be able to afford, data and all that kind of thing.
yeah, but
Very
I think we're going to find that to be a loan without the usury hangover.
We're going to see
Yeah.
many smiling faces and many smiling families because of this game in the coming time.
Is it
Yeah,
a
but
1,000 coins that they're going to give, or is it 100? Couldn't remember.
1,000 is a million. That's why he said you'd be a millionaire.
Okay.
And I'm sure that a bit of comfort to the family as they always worry about how are they going to handle another child when
And yet they love the children. Yeah.
they hardly can support what they have. So this would bring some emotional balance in a way to the parents if they understand what's happening or what this gift is. So we just have to make it aware. This is all he's asking us to do. Not so much show people to do nano coding, although you can do that, but just get them to start playing the game.
well, I don't want to speak out of line, but I would assume that this is not going to be like an entitlement. And that's one of the things that I've noticed with the younger generation. You know, even if they see a nickel or a quarter on the street, they won't bend over to pick it up. And to my mind, you know, it would be good exercise for them to bend over and pick it up because they're lazy as like all
Yeah.
get out. And with the restriction on the games, like I say, you know, there are gamers who are actually gaming 20 to 24 hours a day, and that's no exaggeration. And that it's unhealthy. So by limiting the game, it doesn't limit the hours, but it limits the number of moves. And from what I've noticed is the players are all getting wiser and the game is getting tougher. And let's remember, it is a game. So, you know, it's not an inheritance or it's not an entitlement. You actually do play the game. But, you know, you look at, you know, people who play casino and who go to the bingo or people who, you know, sit around, watch their movies. All of that can be put in the basket of wasting my time. And, you know, as much fun as it is, there is no security. It's all you know, frivolous, and of course the house always wins. But in this game, we all win together. You see, the notion came up, and I'm just going to digress a little bit. You cannot be a rich man in a poor community because you would have to be a king. Because if that community is poor and they knew that you were rich, you would soon be poor. So the only way that you can be a rich man is if your community is a rich man. Now you may come in as poor, but you know, if you start, you know, robbing and stealing and things like that, uh, you know, to generate your wealth, you're not going to last very long. So the way the natural society works, there's a bounty, and that bounty is the reward of cooperation. And all you have to look at is as spring is coming up, you look to the gardens, you look to the forests, and you see all the various species, how they grow together. and there's no bows and arrows, and there's no guns firing off, and no bombs being dropped, and there's no animosity. There's a respect for your position, and gardeners have a special knowledge that each flower takes its turn, and some flowers grow in the spring, and some flowers grow in the summer, and some flowers grow in the fall. And when they acquire that knowledge, then they get this beautiful garden that is flowering all year round, but it's flowering with different flowers. So there's a overlapping fields, there's a cooperation, and this is what Mother Nature is trying to explain to us. And why are we having so much trouble? And the armies have to understand that when they walk through that field and they trample on all those flowers, guess what? When they leave, the flowers come back. So, whatever you're doing as a military man is not, how shall we say it? It's not enduring. Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you, Alan.
So, of course, as Mr. Kesh said, this is the freedom of the man and the nations is hidden behind the game. So the game is just, in a way, a gimmick, not really a gimmick, but in a gimmick, but it's the freedom of the man that we're after, that no one can abuse due to a lack of knowledge. And we can change locations on this planet. This is, we're going to see so many things, I believe, in the coming time, whether that will be, again, a month or a year or whatever. It's just beyond our imagination that technologies of this sort could be available and have been available, but have been, in a way, blocked. So support the game, encourage others to play the game, continue to share the knowledge, but this is going to have a far-reaching effect on all of us. Thank you all for being here and bringing this sort of idea. Anyone else want to add any other comments? Okay, we'll just bring up a couple little things here about the creating a peaceful universe. This is what this game is meant to do. And of course, the universe is right between the two ears as I'm seeing it at this point. This is the energy dimension. We'll go back and look at some of that later on in the workshop, perhaps this week in some other settings. But this is the idea of thinking, speaking, and acting good. If you don't think wrong, then you don't talk wrong and you don't do wrong in so many ways. And then if we can apply this more and more gradually, step by step, nobody's an angel here, then may you be proud of the work you do, the person you are, and the difference you make. As we all realize, we're starting to bank ahead in a way by sort of getting our act together, as he mentioned about the Belgians and some other places. And we're doing that too on a very small level, but it's for you to understand it, investigate it, and apply it. Not so much to the others, which we're very fond of doing, but to yourself. So thank you all again for being here. We appreciate your time and your presence, and we acknowledge you.